In Chapter 2, Marx takes a look at money, specifically the historical development of money as a means of commodity exchange. We'll look at money as a commodity and why historically precious metals tended to be used. For capitalism to work, you need commodity exchange between producers. Producers must sell things. Commodities don't represent use values to their producers because, by definition, a commodity is something produced for exchange rather than for use. And so commodities represent use values to those who don't produce them. If I make a candle, if I make a candle to sell, then it's a use value to you if you buy it. It's less of a use value for me because I made it to sell it, to make money. Producers have to interact with each other to fulfill these various needs. Individual producers act as stand-ins for the commodities they make. You have the butcher who makes and sells meat, you have a tailor who makes and sells clothing. Marx says that social relations between producers mirrors economic relations between commodities. Producers of commodities view each other in the context of the commodity relations. With commodities on a market being exchanged for other commodities, they naturally have comparative values. A computer might be worth more than a jelly bean, but they need to have some use value for all this to make sense. As a general rule, while noting that there are exceptions based on the whims of individuals, items that are of low use value also have low value generally. A sundial might have had higher use value in the past before the invention of more precise methods of keeping time, but very few people would be bothered to buy one now. The act of exchange determines whether or not the labor that went into a commodity is useful for others. The actual values of commodities get determined through a bartering process on a market. Every producer who wants to buy and sell is seeking to rid themselves of a commodity and acquire a commodity that has a use value to them. They may be willing to reach the step through an intermediate commodity, though, provided it has the use value. Eventually, society may reach a consensus on a universal commodity to act as a stand-in for this intermediate commodity. So, for example, let's say I want to acquire a pair of shoes. And to get a pair of shoes, I'm willing to exchange these coats that I've made. I might be willing to sell the coats for bread and sell the bread for shoes. And that bread would become the intermediate commodity. Of course, in modern society, the intermediate commodity that we all use is money. I sell coats and buy boots using money to facilitate that commodity exchange. The emergence of money also opens up market opportunities in a much larger geographical area. Ideally, money is going to be something small and valuable, so you can carry it great distances before you exchange. This allows producers and consumers a far greater amount of flexibility in how and what they can buy and sell. A producer of some commodity no longer has to go find someone, preferably nearby, who wants that commodity and is willing to exchange that commodity that you want. If I'm making coats and I'm trying to get a pair of shoes, I don't have to look for someone who's selling shoes and buying coats. I can now just use this intermediate commodity. I can sell the coats. Now I have money in general, looking for someone else who's selling shoes who will accept that money. Precious metals are a natural form for this universal exchange commodity because not only are precious metals easier to transport, but its value is evenly distributed throughout substance. So, what do I mean by that? So think about if a table were to function as our money commodity. We all carry tables around to use to barter with. If I want shoes, I sell some coats for tables, and I take these tables to the market and I trade them for shoes. But a table wouldn't be a good money commodity because the value of a table is not evenly distributed throughout the table. If I cut this table in half, half a table has a lot less use value than a full table. I mean a lot less than half. Half a table, you can't, it doesn't stand up, it doesn't serve as a table anymore, it'll just fall over. So half a table is not half as valuable as a full table. That's what we mean when we're saying that the value of a commodity is not evenly distributed through it. With something like precious metal, like gold for example, half an ounce of gold is exactly half the value of a full ounce of gold. So that does scale with the value there. The value scales with how much substance you have. So note here that the money commodity begins to assume two use values. Let's look at gold for example. Gold is very electrically conductive and it doesn't tarnish, so it's useful in a variety of industrial applications. So on its own, gold has use value, but serving as this money commodity, it now has this social use value in that it facilitates commodity exchange. It's useful because it is money in much the same way that even though the innate use of a dollar bill is marginal at best, you could, I guess, burn it for warmth, it's still useful because it is money, because it's serving that facilitation of commodity exchange. So how does the value of the money commodity get set? Well, through the same bartering process that determined the value of commodities before money came into existence. People met on a market, there was a supply and demand going on, and the tailor was willing to part with 3 coats for 2 loaves of bread or whatever. These things get negotiated out on the marketplace, and there's where your values come from. That happens for money as well. A certain amount of gold gets accepted for a certain amount of coats or loaves of bread or tin or iron or whatever, and then you have the value of money gets set that way. Once a value has been established for the money commodity, though, it's still subject, like any other commodity, to having its value affected by the socially necessary labor time. Suppose an ounce of silver could be traded for a bushel of wheat. If, by means of some easier mining techniques, silver becomes twice as abundant, the natural value of a bushel of wheat will be, twice as much because silver is now half as valuable. Or in modern economics, I guess, if just anybody could print money, guess what? The value of the dollar would crash. And with that, Marx has looked at money and what it does and how it functions and what role it serves. There's a lot of people who will argue that society would be a lot better off without money. And certainly that's true in a post-scarcity society where you could have all your needs fulfilled. But money plays this historical role that is needed for the development of society. It's needed for commodity exchange. There are pros and there are cons, yes, but the pros far outweigh the cons. And any problem that arises from the development of money, if money weren't there, that problem would simply arise in commodity exchange. So it's important to look at money as a tool, not as an intrinsically bad or good thing. So when we talk about communism abolishing money, yes, that's the goal. But not because money is good or bad, but because in communism, commodity exchange is abolished. In communism, things are not produced for sale, they are produced to fulfill needs. They're produced for their use values, not their exchange values. So, communism producing commodities, or producing objects for their use value makes money irrelevant. That's why communism makes money obsolete. It's less of a moral argument and more of a utility perspective.